Now, people today may be rejecting organized religion, but they are drawn towards spirituality. And why is spirituality so important? Well, I want us to think about how life got to be the way it is in the modern age. A historical period known as the Renaissance began in the 1300s, and the Renaissance is the historical period that marks the transition from the Middle Ages to what's called the modern age. The Middle Ages is sort of like the Dark Ages. You know, the Roman Empire fell way earlier, and that is said to have plunged the world into the Dark Ages. And then society didn't really recover again until the Renaissance. And that was the period of transition from the Middle Ages to the modern age. And in the Renaissance, the values that we have in the modern age were developed. The ideas that developed during the Renaissance became the ideas upon which modern society would be based. And one of the ideas that developed is what's called empiricism. And empiricism says that all knowledge comes from things we can detect with our senses. We can either see it, hear it, touch it, smell it, or taste it. You can know all things through your senses. Nothing exists that you cannot know through your senses. If you cannot detect it or measure it through an instrument we create, such as a scientific instrument, then it does not exist. And that became the foundational belief of modern science. That's the basic belief modern science is based on. If we cannot detect it with our instruments, it does not exist. And so that's empiricism. Empiricism looks at hard evidence, hard data, things you can measure and things you can observe. And science goes on to tell us that nothing exists that cannot be measured and detected. And science tells us the physical world, the physical reality that we can see and measure is all that exists. That's the scientific view of things. And that leads to another idea, the idea of materialism. Now, when most people think of materialism, they think of an overattachment to things money can buy. But actually, in a larger context, materialism says that everything that exists is made up of matter. Hard little bits of matter. Atoms, in other words. That's materialism. If it's not made up of atoms and molecules, it does not exist. Everything that exists is made up of atoms and molecules, and that's materialism. Now, modern people, including modern Christians, accept the scientific view of things that tells us that there is nothing that does not exist that we cannot measure, that there is nothing that exists that does not have atoms and molecules. And we see the world is operating according to the natural laws, the laws of physics. And science tells us that everything else is random. Everything that exists is due to random combinations of atoms. If you ask a scientist how life began, they will tell you that billions and billions of years ago there were trillions and zillions of atoms flipping around and colliding into each other, and some just happened to collide in such a way to create something that is called life. And so that's the scientific explanation for how life came into being. It's just random. It was a random chance, a random combination. And that's how human beings came into being, through random combinations that evolved over the eons. And so everything is random. You're here because of a random occurrence. You're here because of a chance occurrence. And you can see, if you're here just out of randomness and out of chance, there is no meaning or purpose to your life. In fact, there is no meaning or purpose to the universe. There is no meaning or purpose to anything. It's just all random occurrences. And if you have no meaning, then that leads to a sense of hopelessness. if there is no meaning to anything, if things are just the result of random chance, there is no hope that things will ever get any better unless they get any better just because of chance. And so this is the worldview the modern world brought us. It's a mechanistic view where everything operates automatically just like a machine. Everything is cold and sterile. Everything is empty and devoid of meaning. Everything can be explained by the cold, hard logic of science. There is no soul. The world is just a big machine. There's something else to consider too. As life went on into the 20th century, people accepted that way of looking at things, and also something else happened. People began developing little miniature indoor worlds to live in, isolated from nature. People saw no need to be surrounded by the natural world. They developed lives in which they were as insulated as possible from the natural world. And they wanted to be independent of nature. And they tried to live in artificial worlds, independent of nature. Now I want to contrast that with the Native American view of things. Native Americans lived in what we would consider a very primitive society. They lived in nature and depended on nature, and they lived with the rhythms of nature. They were subjected to the forces of nature. And these rhythms and forces of nature controlled the rhythms of their lives. Their lives were not that much different than the lives of the animals around them. And they saw themselves as creatures of the natural world. And also they saw a spirit in everything. They not only saw themselves as spiritual beings, but all animals, birds, fish, even trees and rocks, they saw as having a spiritual essence. Everything had a spirit. Everything was alive in a way that went more than physical alive, but everything was alive spiritually. The way they looked at things, the world was full of spiritual existence, and they believed there was a world in a different realm, a world beyond the physical realm that they could see. Now contrast that with life today. We've been told there are no spirits. We've been told there is no spiritual world. We have a technological, human-oriented view of the world. We are detached from the natural world around us. And it is no exaggeration to say that science is the new religion of our time. Science is the deity of the world we live in. Trust the science, we are told. I remember a commercial. During the coronavirus, it came on TV one night and it said, "In times like these, we turn to the one thing we can trust above all, science," the religion of our time. The modern world gave us a secular attitude. There is no sense of anything beyond our existence, no sense of anything beyond our short life here. All is inherently meaningless. You will die and go to nothing. You were nothing more than a chance combination of atoms. As modern people were led away from any sense of God, any sense of the spiritual, and they were taken into the worldview of science, they were left with a sense of emptiness, no sense of purpose, no sense that anything has any meaning beyond the mundane, no connection to anything beyond. In all the ways the modern world has had a positive impact on us, it has also had negative impacts. It has led to a crisis in the meaning of life, a feeling of emptiness, and a feeling that something is lacking. And in the modern world, even religion became cold and sterile. With the Protestant Reformation, Christianity became a belief system, just the facts, just the beliefs you're supposed to believe in. Protestant Christianity took the mystery out of Christianity. It took out prayer candles. It took out praying to saints. It took out the idea of sacred places and sacred spaces. It took out the openness to visions and apparitions and hearing from God directly. It took out the notion of spirits operating the world, both good and evil. It took out all the things that at one time made people feel connected to a world beyond the physical. Protestant Christianity made Christianity just like science. Here are the facts. Don't ask, just believe them. Just affirm the cold, hard facts. But there seems to be something inside us that needs something more than the cold, hard facts. There seems to be something inside us that needs a connection to something deeper than ourselves, something deeper than our existence here on earth. There seems to be something inside us that knows that what we see when we look out into the world is not all there is. Despite what science tells us, despite what technology tells us, I think we have an inborn sense that there is, in fact, something beyond. We have an inborn sense that there are more to things than we can see. We know that there is more there. We can't explain it. We just know it. People have been told that there is no spiritual side to anything, but I think there's something inside us that just won't let us believe that. And I think that's why there's such an increase in spirituality today. People may be rejecting organized religion, but something inside them just won't let them reject the idea that there is more to things than we can see. People may accept some things science says, and they may give lip service to the scientific view of the world, but for more and more people, science obviously does not have a complete view of things, and while we might have to mouth our agreement, then in private, in our own minds, we know it's not true. We have a spiritual side to us that maybe we can suppress it or maybe not, or maybe we can suppress it for a while, but eventually our spiritual side cannot be suppressed forever. On the one hand, we live in the modern world, and a part of us accepts what the modern world tells us. On the other hand, the spiritual side calls out from the back of our mind somewhere, telling us that what the modern world tells us is not true. In the face of science, people may try to ignore their spiritual side. They may try to nourish their spiritual side with pills or something like that, or therapy or something like that. But there's a lot of renewed interest in spirituality today, and I think it's because the modern world has given us a world that is so cold, hard, sterile, and empty. How do we view the spiritual realm as Christians? Without really meaning to, I think Christianity has contributed to the confusion when we talk about spirituality. Now, when we think of heaven, what do we think of? I guess if we think of the spiritual side, we think of heaven, and that's where God is, and angels or whatever else might be up there. So heaven is usually the term that we use to refer to the spiritual realm. And we think of heaven as being somewhere else. We don't know exactly where it is, and we don't really believe that if you got in a spaceship and traveled through outer space, you'd eventually get to heaven. But we just think about it being somewhere else. And that's reflected in the thing is that I'm going to heaven when I die. I'm going to heaven in the sense of you're going somewhere else. And that's in the sense of heaven is off somewhere. But I've said this before in here a long time ago, and I want to suggest a different way of looking at the spiritual realm. Instead of looking at the spiritual realm as being off somewhere, instead of looking as that we're in the physical realm here and somewhere else that we can't define is the spiritual realm, I want to look at it as the fact that the spiritual realm encompasses the physical realm. In other words, the physical realm that we are in right now is encompassed within the spiritual realm. The physical realm is not separate from the spiritual. The physical realm is encompassed within the physical. So you are in the spiritual realm right now. You live in the spiritual realm. There is no such thing as two separate realms. You're not waiting to go to the spiritual realm when you die. You're already there. Now think for a minute about what this means. If you're already living in the spiritual realm. Jesus said, I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me will never die. And he who lives and he who dies and believes in me will live. He who believes in me will never die. What in the world could Jesus have meant? And he who dies and believes in me will live. What in the world could he have meant? Consider that Jesus was trying to tell us that we're already in the spiritual realm. We're already there. And think about how, if you really can accept that, that could change your entire attitude toward death. You know, a lot of people today, when they need to nourish their spiritual realm, feel the need to withdraw from the world. Maybe they withdraw from the world for a few minutes every morning to do a meditation or something, or maybe they go on a weekend retreat or something. And maybe the reason we feel the need to withdraw from the world to nourish our spiritual side is not because of the world itself, but it is because of that materialistic, scientific, mechanistic view of the world that we live in today that we have been taught. Maybe that mechanistic, scientific view of the world we live in today is destroying and crushing who and what we really are. Maybe we need to be more open to the spiritual, open to there being much more to things than we can explain. Maybe we need to be open to there being much more than science can explain. Maybe we need to be open to the mystery that what we see now in our own lives and in our own world is just a small part of what all is. Maybe we need to be open to the mystery that our human lives here represent just a tiny part of what's really going on. Maybe we need to be open again to the fact that there are some things that we will never understand with our human minds. I have become convinced over the past couple of years or so that we are living in a critical time. And I think it's my job as a minister to share that and to say that I have become convinced of that. I believe we are living in a critical time. I do not believe things will go on like they are forever like this. I do not believe things can go on. Things are going to fall apart one of these days. And if I could go back and try to say what is one of the factors that have led us to this, it has been that scientific worldview that has led to a sense of meaningless, a sense of hopelessness, and a cold, sterile feel to the modern world. It will not survive the way it is today. Maybe we need to go back and recover some of the mystery. The idea that there is more than what we can see. The idea that there are things we'll never be able to understand. The early Christians saw the whole world as operating with multitudes and multitudes of spirits, principalities, and powers operating everywhere. We see nothing but a few conceited scientists telling us what we will do. Maybe we need to get rid of the certainty. Maybe we need to get rid of the idea that we've got everything figured out. And maybe we need to look at things again with a great sense of mystery. We've lost the sense of mystery. We've lost the sense of wonder. And I think that will, in time, have disastrous consequences.